Hey, what's going on, Headliner Nation? Kyle coming to you from the Draft.com studios with Week 4 waiver wire additions that you should be targeting this week. And it doesn't matter if your team got off to a slow start or if you've gotten off to a hot start. Everybody should be taking a look at these players this week to determine if they can make their teams a little bit better. And you never know. If you've gotten off to a little bit of a slow start, maybe a performance like Mike Evans in Week 3 will change your mind about your team quicker than New York Giants fans changing their minds about Daniel Jones. Let's jump into it. Week 4 waiver wire targets right now. Speaking of Daniel Jones, I don't think anybody really saw this performance coming against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. In his first NFL start, he looked good, not only in the air, but on the ground as well. And he looks like he could be a guy that helps pad some stats for fantasy football owners the rest of the way. Is he what we thought Josh Allen was going to be? I don't know about long term. We'll see what happens with that. But next week against the Washington Redskins, he could really do the same thing again. This past weekend against the Buccaneers, 4 total touchdowns, 2 through the air, 2 on the ground, had 28 yards rushing, 336 yards passing. He looked really, really good. So against Washington next week, as I mentioned, before they play on Monday night, because we always record this video on Sundays, this doesn't take that into account, but Washington was giving up 26.34 points per game to opposing quarterbacks, 4th most in the NFL. So if you're looking for a quarterback this week in Week 4, Daniel Jones should be your number 1 priority ad because of the matchup that he has against Washington. He's going to have some more tough matchups coming up after that, but we'll worry about that later. Go ahead and grab Daniel Jones for right now, and then we will use him in Week 4, and we'll figure out the rest as we go. I know a lot of you were trying to jump off that Tampa Bay Buccaneers bandwagon, and hopefully you didn't do it just yet. We begged and pleaded for you to keep Mike Evans in your lineup if you were thinking about moving him or dropping him or putting him on your bench or whatever it was. We saw some really crazy questions about Mike Evans. He handsomely rewarded you this week with a huge game, and Jameis Winston himself did not look bad. 380 yards passing, 3 touchdowns. He's got a tough matchup against the Rams here in Week 4. However, the week after that, he gets the New Orleans Saints, who are giving up just about 20 points per game to opposing quarterbacks. Maybe this cake matchup that he had against the New York Giants defense was enough to get this offense going. Maybe moving forward, we'll see this offense start to pick it up a little bit. Maybe O.J. Howard gets going now. Mike Evans is ready to roll. Chris Godwin obviously has been good outside of this past week. So we'll see what happens moving forward. But Jameis Winston is going to be a really nice ad for you if you need to stream somebody or if you've been affected by any of the injuries that have happened at the position lately. Last week, I cautioned you to wait on Mason Rudolph and pivot to some other quarterback options instead. However, this week, I'm going to encourage you to take a shot at him if you are still looking for help. Only 11% owned right now. And this past week, he didn't look that bad. Now, I've always liked Mason Rudolph long term. I thought he landed in the perfect situation. He was one of my top quarterbacks coming out of that draft. I thought he had a lot of long-term value as soon as he sat for a little bit. But maybe we're seeing the start of something special here with Mason Rudolph coming in as the next starting quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers. We'll see what happens with Ben Roethlisberger, but Rudolph has the tools to do that. Now, this past week, it wasn't bad. 174 yards, 2 touchdowns. Now, 76 yards came on a huge Juju Smith-Schuster catch. So we'll see what happens going forward with that. But next week, he gets Cincinnati. They're giving up just under 20 points per game to opposing quarterbacks. So if you had Ben Roethlisberger and you decided to pivot to someone else this week just as a 1-week stream and you want to go back to Mason Rudolph, I think we see him grow and grow and grow over the next couple of weeks, starting with a good matchup for him against Cincinnati in Week 4. So definitely take a shot at him now. And if you're in a super flex or a 2 QB league, then he 100% needs to be owned if you have any room on your roster right now. So take a shot on any of these guys. Decent quarterbacks to take this week. Daniel Jones, however, should be your top priority at quarterback. Raheem, not quite a must-start. Mostert didn't quite return the value that we would have hoped after his performance last week in Week 3. But moving forward, he's still a guy that I want us taking a look at. 42% owned, and he had 12 carries for 79 yards. So he's averaged over 6.6 yards per carry. He looks good. He definitely looks like a running back that has that agility, a little bit of that burst. Definitely a guy that can slip away from some tackles. So I definitely think we keep an eye on him. However, another name I want you to keep an eye on as well, Jeffrey Wilson, who had 2 touchdowns in the red zone this week as well, was able to snipe those away from Breida and Mostert. So keep an eye on both of these guys. Mostert's the guy that I like a little bit more than Wilson right now. Even though he had that fumble, I still think he bounces back next week. Continue to take a look at him if you're looking for any help at running back. Up next is Frank Gore, 44.3% owned, and he's not a guy that you're going to pick up right now to start right now. He's got a tough matchup against the Patriots in week 4. They're giving up just under 15 points per game to opposing running backs, so it's going to be a difficult start for him. He looked good this past week, though. 14 carries, 76 yards, 1 touchdown. I was hoping for a little bit more from him. TJ Yeldon was able to get in the game a little bit more than we had thought maybe that he would. However, Devin Singletary, we don't know how long he's going to miss for. So keep an eye on Frank Gore. If you don't need anybody this week, if you're just looking for a stash option and you have some room, then take a shot at Frank Gore, because in coming weeks, he could help out a lot more, especially if Devin Singletary ends up missing more time. One name that we didn't think would end up on this list, and a lot of owners really hoped never would, Wayne Gallman from the New York Giants at 1.2% owned, is showing up because of the injury to Saquon Barkley this past weekend. Got his ankle rolled over. It looks like a high ankle sprain right now, but we do not know how long he is going to be out, and he is set to go for an MRI on Monday. Again, we record the show on Sunday night, so we still don't know at this time the extent of the injury. So if you're a Saquon Barkley owner, only if you're a Saquon Barkley owner, should you add Gallman. Now, if you have some better options on your waiver wire, definitely go that route first. And if you don't own Saquon Barkley, I'm not interested in taking a shot at Gallman. After Barkley went out of the game, Gallman had 5 attempts for only 13 yards. So don't expect a whole lot. The reason that Saquon Barkley is so good is because of his talent. He's not good because of the situation, the line, or anything like that, or the quarterback or the receivers. He is the star of that offense, an offense that until this past weekend hadn't looked great. Gallman's not going to be a guy that's going to come in and replicate anything close to that. So I am putting him on here because of the injury to Saquon Barkley. If you play in a deeper league, you might need to add Gallman right away. But if not, you can probably pass over him and be safe that you're not going to be passing up too much production moving forward. One question that I had to ask myself this weekend, does Tony Pollard have standalone value now? 103 rushing yards on 13 attempts to go with a touchdown, another 3 receptions for 25 yards. And the question is one that we should be asking now because of the way this offense is playing for Dallas. This is a team that is scoring a lot of points, that is playing very efficiently, that is being led by a quarterback that has been overlooked way too many times. And even though we have Ezekiel Elliott, who ran for 125 yards, unfortunately he didn't find the end zone, we're still thinking at this point that Tony Pollard could start to have standalone value. He is a guy that I am taking a shot on moving forward, adding to my roster and seeing what happens as the year progresses. Best case scenario, he puts up numbers not like this, but slightly close to it. Maybe upwards of 75 total yards per game, possibly sniffs the end zone a couple of times as well. Zeke still gets the brunt of the carries. But if this offense is putting away teams very early in games, they're not going to sacrifice Zeke, okay? They just signed him to a long-term deal. They want him to be healthy. So if they're up by 20, 25 points at any point in time in a game, they could start slipping Pollard in there a lot more often, which is going to decrease the ceiling that Ezekiel Elliott has moving forward. But because of all that, Tony Pollard should be on your radar and probably your roster now at this point. All right, so before we get into the 4 names listed here on the board, just want to talk about one other guy real quick. Mecole Hardman is still only 44% owned in fantasy football leagues right now. Last week I had him on the waiver wire report, and a little bit of shade came this way. A lot of people didn't think that he should be added over Robinson. Well, as you saw this weekend, both of them still had good weeks. Hardman had a little bit better of a week, though. And that's what he brings to the table. That big playability that he showed is something that he's going to have week in and week out. So Robinson's a guy that might be a little bit more steady, But Hardman's the guy that is going to have that big play potential every single time he steps on the field until Tyreek Hill comes back. Then at that point, we'll see what happens. We'll see who ends up finding the bench a little bit more often than not. But over the last 2 weeks, he's got 6 receptions. In week 2, he had 61 yards. This week, he had 97 yards. He has a touchdown each of the last 2 weeks. And it's going to be any Kansas City wide receiver on any given week as well. One of these guys is going to have a huge week regardless of the opponent. So if you're adding him, just know that if you put him in your lineup, that there's always that potential for a bust, because then Watkins or Robinson could go off. Well, instead of Watkins, maybe it's Robinson and Hardman. Maybe it's not. Maybe Watkins is going to have a week like he did in week 1. So a lot of different things can happen with this offense. So just keep that in mind as you're adding those guys. Now, with that being said, the first person listed here on this report, Marquez Valdes-Scantling. 49.9% owned. Barely just under the threshold. Remember, to be on this show, you have to be at least 50%, or you have to be under 50% owned. 6 for 99 and a touchdown this week. And now, next week, he gets the Philadelphia Eagles, who are giving up the 3rd most points per game to opposing wide receivers. Now, this was his first big game of the year. I expect Devontae Adams to get going at some point. So week in, week out value, probably not. More than likely, Valdes-Scantling is going to be a guy that you are playing in good matchups. Like next week against Philadelphia, you'll put him in your lineup. If there's some tougher matches, you might put him back on your bench. But he's definitely a guy that you should own and have just in case you need some of that big play upside in any given week. All right, so on the live show this past week, I was told if I was going to talk about this player anymore that I had to sing when I brought his name up. So, ladies and gentlemen, the next player on our list is DJ Chark. DJ Chark. I can't do it. That's going to be the last time that happens. He's got a touchdown in all 3 of his games this year. Somehow he's still only 41% owned. And by the time the dust settles here in week 3, he's going to be a wide receiver 1 in total fantasy points. So he's definitely outperformed my expectations for him. I just didn't think he was going to be able to keep this up, and he has. So he's definitely a guy that needs to be added. Now he does have a tough matchup next week. He gets Denver. They are 3rd least in points per game to opposing wide receivers. So if you're going to be adding him this week, I wouldn't necessarily be adding him under the impression that he's going to start and perform right away, but I would be adding him for long-term value because our boy Gardner Minshew apparently is just going to continue to ball out for the Jacksonville Jaguars, and DJ Chark could end up balling out right along with him. So you'll want to add him before it's too late. So even in some of the deepest leagues, Philip Dorsett is still hanging out there, only 5.2% owned. And now we know from this past week, and Julian Edelman went out with a rib injury. He's set to have some more tests. Right now, it's looking like everything is clean, though. So he could end up being back. But who knows? Maybe the Patriots say, you know what? We're not going to rush him back. And if that's the case, now you've lost Antonio Brown. Now you have Julian Edelman banged up. You're also looking at Josh Gordon, who was banged up a little bit this past weekend as well. Philip Dorsett had a pretty nice game for the New England Patriots. 6 for 53 and 1 touchdown, 7 targets. Julian Edelman, obviously, again, moving forward, if he misses any time, Philip Dorsett has a ton of value. He's got a tough matchup next week against Buffalo. So again, another player that we're potentially adding for long-term investment, not investment in week 4. But after that, then he gets the Washington Redskins, who really can't stop too much of anybody right now. So Philip Dorsett definitely should be a waiver claim for you this week, somebody that you should be adding, especially if you have any issues at wide receiver right now. Nelson Aguilar had a huge day for the Philadelphia Eagles this weekend against the Detroit Lions. Yes, he started off a little bit slow, and he had a fumble, and maybe you were panicked a little bit if you were using him in any DFS lineups, but he ended up coming through for you. 8 receptions for 50 yards, 2 touchdowns. That's where a lot of that value is made up. Here's the thing, though. Keep in mind, even though those numbers volume-wise weren't very high, 12 targets. 12 targets. When Alshon Jeffrey misses time, it's almost a guarantee that Nelson Aguilar is going to get double-digit targets. But how long are these guys going to be hurt? We know Deshaun Jackson is going to miss multiple weeks. Could Jeffrey play next week? He almost played this week. If he comes back, maybe Aguilar takes a little bit of a hit, but he's still a guy that I want to own right now. 37%. If these injuries continue to happen, if these guys just can't get back on the field right away, then Aguilar is a guy that's going to continue to hold value. And who knows? He played so well this past weekend. Maybe him and Wentz start to form a little bit more of that bond that they had a couple of years ago. And he gets back to being a guy that you could rely on in your flex every single week. All right, not a ton to talk about at tight end this week. We're starting off with Jason Witten, 42% owned right now. He's definitely looking to become more of a security blanket for Dak Prescott, who really hasn't needed any security because he's balling out right now. Three receptions for 54 yards. Didn't end up finding the end zone this week. Still played decent, though. A tough matchup coming up, though, against Green Bay and New Orleans, both who are giving up less than 10 points per game to opposing tight ends right now. So again, another investment that you're making for long-term success in your league. Week 4 is not going to be great for Jason Witten, but if you really need a tight end for Week 4, I'm going to have another name for you here in just a moment. Dawson Knox, only 0.3% owned. That's right. That's not a typo there. It's 0.3, not 3, 0.3% owned. It was windy. It was windy this past weekend during their game, and we know in Buffalo, the wind, the weather, things like that can pick up and become worse throughout the year. So, was Dawson Knox looked at a little bit more this year because of that wind? Did they figure that there might be some trouble throwing the ball down the field? If there was, then Dawson Knox might be a guy that continues to pick up steam every single week as we head into the winter months and the weather gets a little bit bad, a little bit worse, I should say, in Buffalo. 3 receptions, 67 yards, and a touchdown. He led the team in receiving yards this past week. So keep an eye on him. Very lowly owned. You could wait another week probably if you wanted to. However, if you really need another tight end, right now might be the time to jump and then monitor the situation with him on your bench because he might not be available much longer if he starts to become a trusted target for Josh Allen. All right, you heard me mention it a minute ago that maybe Jason Witten wasn't a guy that you wanted to grab and start for Week 4. However, Will Dissly absolutely is. If he's on your waiver wire, you pick him up and you start him against Arizona in Week 4. And quite honestly, he might be my tight end 1 in my rankings next week. Let me tell you why. So far this season, these are the performances that the Arizona Cardinals have given up to opposing tight ends. In Week 1, TJ Hawkinson, 6 receptions, 131 yards, and a touchdown. In Week 2, Mark Andrews, 8 receptions, 112 yards, 1 touchdown. In Week 3, Greg Olsen, 6 receptions, 75 yards, 2 touchdowns. Will Dissly is basically a lock to find the end zone and put up near or over 100 yards in Week 4. He could be a huge play for you. Even if you're looking for a DFS tight end, I'm just going to throw this out there. Start Will Dissly, okay? This dude's going to ball out in Week 4. He's going to be a huge help for your team. I would 100% take a look at adding him this week. Only 24.3% owned. So he's a viable streaming option. Even if you just pick him up to stream him in Week 4, go for it. Don't use like a top 1, 2, 3 priority on the waiver wire, but definitely put in a waiver claim for him this week. Pick him up, start him in Week 4, and reap all the benefits. All right, there you have it, my waiver wire targets for Week 4. If you need to improve your team in any area, these are some guys that you should be taking a shot on. And don't forget, one more time, just in case you missed it, you're picking up and starting Will Dissly in Week 4. All right, Headliner Nation, thanks so much for tuning into this episode. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications so you know every time we go live or every time we drop a video, which is basically every day of the week these days. Make sure that you also hit that like button on the video, leave any comments, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners. Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.